The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordance hummed with the low thrum of translators and the shuffle of alien feet. Ambassador Lyra Voss of the Krellian Enclave stood at her podium, her iridescent scales catching the artificial light like fractured opals. Cautious by nature, she carried her people's history of wary alliances in every deliberate gesture. Beside her, Captain Thorn Reyes of the United Earth Protectorate leaned against the railing, his human frame relaxed but his dark eyes sharp, scanning the assembly with the quiet grit that had carried him through a dozen border skirmishes. The vote had just concluded. Earth's representatives, Thorn among them, had announced their withdrawal from the Concordance, effective immediately. Murmurs rippled through the chamber like wind over dry grass. Lyra's claws tightened on the podium's edge. "This is unprecedented," she said, her voice a measured hiss through the translator. "The Enclave has relied on human engineering for our defense grids. Without it, we're exposed." Thorn straightened, his jaw set in that stubborn line Lyra had come to recognize as human resolve. "Earth's resources are stretched thin, Ambassador. We've given enough tech, troops, even our best minds. The Concordance takes, but it doesn't share the burden equally." He spoke plainly, no bluster, just the weight of facts honed by years of negotiation. Across the chamber, Delegate Zorak of the Vorith Collective pounded a fist on his console, his furred muzzle twisting in outrage. Zorak was the witty one, always quick with a barb to deflate egos, but today his humor soured into accusation. "You humans strut in like saviors, then slink away when the real work begins? Our trade routes collapse without your ships patrolling them. The whole council teeters because of your withdrawal." The chamber erupted. Holographic displays flickered as species from a dozen worlds voiced their fury, the avian Solari screeching about lost migration pacts, the silicon-based drone rumbling about disrupted mineral exchanges. Lyra glanced at Thorn, her caution warring with a flicker of admiration for his unflinching stance. Humans, she thought, always the ones to upend the board when the game grew unfair. Thorn met her gaze, a faint nod acknowledging the storm they'd unleashed. "We didn't come here to beg," he said, loud enough to cut through the din. "Earth's pulling out to protect its own. If the Concordance wants to survive, it'll have to learn to stand without us holding it up." As security drones whirred to life, herding the delegates toward calm, Lyra felt the first real crack in the political facade. Alliances frayed at the edges, old rivalries sharpening like blades. The withdrawal wasn't just a departure, it was a fracture, and she wondered if anyone truly grasped the void it would leave. In the antechamber afterward, away from the chaos, Lyra cornered Thorn. The air recyclers hummed softly, carrying the faint scent of recycled ozone. "You knew this would ruin us," she said, her scales dimming slightly in agitation. "The Vorith will push for sanctions. The Solari might bolt entirely." Thorn rubbed the back of his neck, a human tick for discomfort. "Maybe. But Earth's done playing second fiddle. We've got our own worlds to fortify. Pirate raids on the outer colonies aren't waiting for council approval." He paused, his voice dropping. "Look, Lyra, your Enclave's been a fair partner." Yet in the dim cockpit, with the nebulous chaos fading behind, a spark of human grit held them steady. The vote loomed, and with it, the ruin or redemption of what Earth had built. Kaler paced the dim-lit chamber of the Auxiliary Council Hall, his elongated fingers tapping against the obsidian table that hummed faintly with residual energy fields. The air recyclers wheezed, struggling against the influx of diplomats from a dozen worlds, all crammed into this makeshift space after the main dome's lockdown. Earth's abrupt withdrawal had shattered the fragile alliances like brittle ice, and now the secondary factions, those opportunistic clusters from the rim worlds, were circling like predators scenting blood. Lyra stood by the viewport, her iridescent scales shifting from calm blue to agitated violet as she watched the orbital traffic snarl. Shuttles darted erratically, dodging debris from the hasty evacuations. "We can't trust the Vexery relay anymore," she murmured, her voice a soft chime that cut through the murmurs. "If the humans are truly gone, their tech backbone pulls the plug on half our comms grid. One wrong signal and we're blind." Alex leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his human frame a stark contrast to the fluid forms around him. He'd stayed behind as a consultant, stubborn loyalty, or perhaps just unfinished business with the Council's archives. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, flicked to Kaler. "Blind's better than deaf." The Vexari are already whispering about reallocating sectors. If we wait for their assistance, we'll wake up with our borders redrawn. Kaler halted his pacing, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the room's glow like shattered prisms. As the nominal leader of the neutral bloc, caution defined him. Every decision weighed against centuries of fragile peace. But Earth's exit had upended that calculus. Without human mediation, the old treaties frayed at the edges. A direct probe into the core net risks escalation. The enforcers could interpret it as sabotage. The chamber's outer door hissed open, admitting a rush of cooler air laced with the metallic tang of the station's underbelly. Mira entered, her lithe Zarathian build moving with predatory grace. She was their wild card, a former scout with a reputation for bending rules without breaking them outright. In her clawed hand, she clutched a salvaged data slate, its screen flickering with intercepted bursts. "Talk's cheap, Kaler. The Vexari just locked down the auxiliary ports. Our supply shuttle's stranded, food since for 3 cycles max before rationing hits hard." Tension rippled through the room like a wave. Lyra turned from the viewport, her scales deepening to indigo. "We planned for this." The backup relay in the outer ring failed, Mira interrupted, tossing the slate onto the table. It skidded to a stop, displaying jagged error logs. Human encryption held, but the Vexari jammed the failover. Clever bastards anticipated our pivot. Alex pushed off the wall, snatching up the slate. His fingers danced across the interface, pulling up fragmented code streams. Earth's withdrawal hadn't just been a political gut punch. The humans had layered their departure with subtle digital tripwires, ensuring no one could easily step into the void. Not jammed, mirrored. They're routing our signals back at us, looping the requests. It's a stall tactic, buying time to consolidate their own pull-out data. Kaler's mandibles clicked in frustration. Then we adapt. Send a manual drone, low profile, no signatures. Myra's laugh was a low rasp. Drones are the first thing they scan for. We're down to basics here, no fleet, no overrides. One wrong move and enforcers swarm us like insects. The group fell silent as the station groaned faintly, a distant vibration from docking clamps engaging elsewhere. Alex's mind raced, piecing together half-remembered human protocols from his archive dives. Earth's ingenuity wasn't in grand fleets but in the quiet hacks, the improvised fixes that turned desperation into leverage. He met Lyra's gaze, seeing the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "We don't send a drone. We go ourselves. Suit up, manual tether to the outer comms pylon. I can spoof the human auth codes from there, bypass the loop without tripping alarms." Lyra's scales flared briefly. "That's suicide. The void between sections is a kill zone now, radiation spikes from the disrupted shields. Better than starving in here while the Vexari carve up what's left." Alex's voice was steady, laced with that human grit that had once held the council together. He wasn't brave in the reckless sense, but his wit turned fear into fuel, choices into chances. Kaler hesitated, then nodded once, his caution yielding to necessity. "Prepare the suits. Mira, you're on point for navigation. Lyra, monitor from the airlock." As they moved, the chamber's lights dimmed in a scheduled brownout, casting long shadows that danced like uncertain futures. Outside, the stars wheeled indifferently, but in the tether's fragile line, a spark of defiance took root. One small breach against the ruin Earth's shadow had wrought. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's co-pilot seat, her knuckles whitening as the vessel shuddered through the nebulous fringes. The swirling gases painted the viewport in hues of bruised purple and electric blue, but her focus stayed locked on the console's flickering readouts. Beside her, Crix, the avian counselor from the Vexari Enclave, pecked at his own controls with precise talons, his feathers ruffled in agitation. "The relay buoy signal is degrading faster than projected," he muttered, his voice a series of sharp clicks translated through the implant in Alara's ear. "If we don't sync before the interference peaks, we'll lose the Armistice broadcast entirely." Alara nodded, her jaw set. She'd volunteered for this run, smuggling the fragile diplomatic packet through the contested Veil Nebula, after Earth's withdrawal had shattered the galactic concordance. The humans' abrupt exit, citing endless betrayals and resource drains, had left the Council in tatters, with factions splintering like cracked hull plating. Now, pirate guilds were probing the edges of former trade lanes, and without a unified voice, the armistice with the rogue Krell collective hung by a thread. Ilara's mission: deliver the packet that could rally the splintered allies, proving humanity's ingenuity wasn't fully severed from the fold. But the nebula's magnetic storms were turning the simple hop into a gauntlet. Adjusting thrust vector, she said, her fingers dancing over the manual overrides. The shuttle bucked again, engines whining as they fought the pull of ionized clouds. Crix's plan had seemed solid back at the outpost: skirt the outer arms, use the buoy to bounce the signal past the interference. But as the first storm cell engulfed them, reality bit hard. Alarms blared, hull integrity dropping, comms fritzing into static. Crix squawked, wings half unfurling in the confined cockpit. The buoy's offline. Pirates must have hit it en route. His eyes, bright and unblinking, darted to Ilara. We can't broadcast from here. The packet's encryption will corrupt in this soup. Ilara's mind raced, drawing on the gritty resourcefulness that had defined human spacers for generations. No tech wizardry, just what worked. Forget the buoy. We'll go manual, direct line to the nearest relay station on the far side. But it'll mean punching through the core storm. Risky, but if we time it right. She trailed off, plotting the course on her overlay. The core was a maelstrom of plasma flares, capable of frying shields in seconds. One wrong vector and they'd be debris. Crix hesitated, his cautious nature clashing with the urgency. He was no coward. The Vexari prided themselves on calculated flights, but this bordered on recklessness. The odds are what we make them, Ilara cut in, her voice steady, infused with that human grit that had once held the council together. She locked eyes with him, seeing the flicker of doubt give way to resolve. You fly point on evasion if they show. I'll handle the burst transmission when we break through. He nodded, talons clicking agreement. The shuttle dove deeper, the nebula's glow intensifying until it bathed the cabin in an otherworldly light. Ilara felt the weight of it all, the council's ruin, the stakes of a galaxy teetering on war, but she pushed it down, focusing on the controls. A plasma arc licked the hull, sparks dancing across the viewport like vengeful spirits. Then, sensors pinged, incoming signatures. Not storms, ships. Pirate raiders, sleek and predatory, emerging from the clouds like sharks scenting blood. They're on us, Crix hissed, banking hard as laser fire stitched the void. Ilara's heart pounded, but her hands stayed sure. She rerouted power from life support to engines, the air growing thin as the shuttle accelerated. Evasive pattern delta, now. The vessel twisted, dodging a volley that scorched past. Crix's wings beat the air in rhythm with his maneuvers, a blur of feathers and focus. One raider closed fast, its boarding clamps extending like claws. Ilara spotted the vulnerability, a heat bloom from their overtaxed drives. Target their exhaust vents, she barked. Human trick, overload their cooling. Crix adapted instantly, firing a precision shot from their meager arsenal. The raider erupted in a bloom of fire, spinning away. But the others pressed, and a lucky hit grazed the shuttle's flank, shearing off a stabilizer. Alarms wailed, the craft listed, controls sluggish. We're venting atmosphere, Crix reported, voice tight. Can't hold the core trajectory. Ilara assessed, sweat beading on her brow. The plan's backfire stung, the direct push had drawn the wolves too soon. But surrender wasn't in her blood. Patch me into the packet's core. I'll transmit piecemeal, buoy or no. Buy us time. As Crix complied, Ilara keyed the emergency burst, the signal fighting through the interference in jagged pulses. The words of the armistice, forged in Earth's final council session, streamed out, a beacon of fragile hope. Pirate fire rattled the hull again, closer now, but she held the line, her resolve a anchor in the chaos. The shuttle broke the core's edge just as the last raider veered off, perhaps spooked by the incoming council patrol signals Ilara's gamble had summoned. But the cost lingered, the packet incomplete, the hull breached, and Crix nursing a singed wing. They limped toward the relay station, the nebula fading behind, but the political fractures it masked yawned wider. One transmission couldn't mend a ruined council overnight. Yet in that moment, Ilara glimpsed the spark of Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones as they skimmed the asteroid field's edge. The viewport framed a jagged dance of rocks tumbling in slow motion, each one a potential grave if their scanners glitched again. Beside her, Jax Harlan, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked cheeks and a perpetual squint, tapped furiously at his console. "Power surge in the rear thrusters," he muttered, his voice laced with that familiar edge of sarcasm. "Nothing we can't patch, but if the Council ships catch wind of this detour, we're explaining why we're joyriding through a debris cloud instead of heading straight to the summit." Across the narrow cabin, Ambassador Lyra Keel leaned against the bulkhead, her iridescent scales catching the dim overhead lights. As the last holdout from the fractured alliance, she crossed her arms, her four-fingered hands clenching. "Joyriding? This is survival, Harlan. Earth's pullout shattered the Council's fragile peace. Half the sectors are already skirmishing over resource claims. If we don't deliver the data core intact, the whole negotiation collapses." Her tone was steady, but her eyes darted to the tactical display, where red blips marked pursuing vessels from the rival Vexery faction. They weren't just after the shuttle. They wanted the encrypted files on human withdrawal tactics, the very ingenuity that had forced Earth's hand. She'd led convoys through worse, pirate blockades, solar flares, but this felt personal. The data core, tucked in a shielded compartment behind Jax's station, held blueprints of human adaptive tech, modular shields that reconfigured mid-battle AI predictors that turned chaos into strategy. Earth had walked away to protect it, leaving the Council in ruins, but now it was their leverage. Or their noose. "How long until we're clear?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over holographic keys. 10 minutes if the field holds. But that surge? It's pulling from life support. We lose it and we're breathing vacuum. He glanced up, his witty grin faltering for a split second. Caution Ward with his bravado. He jury-rigged half the shuttle's systems after the initial ambush, but even he knew limits. Lyra pushed off the wall, pacing the 2 steps to the core's access panel. "Then we adapt. Like humans do." It wasn't flattery, it was fact, born from years negotiating with Earth's envoys. She remembered the withdrawal announcement, calm, resolute, no ultimatums. Just a quiet exit that left power vacuums exploding across the galaxy. Now, with the Vexery closing in, she felt the weight of that legacy. Reroute the auxiliary generators. Prioritize evasion over comfort. The shuttle lurched as a proximity alarm blared, a fist-sized asteroid clipping the hull with a metallic screech. Sparks flew from Jax's console, and he cursed under his breath, slamming a fist on the override. "Got it, shields holding at 60%. But they're firing probes now. Those bastards are mapping our path." Ilara's hands tightened on the controls, plotting a sharp veer into the denser field. Risky but predictable patterns were death in a chase. "They're hailing," Lyra said, her voice dropping. The comms crackled to life without waiting for approval. A gravelly Vexery voice boomed through, "Surrender the core or we'll pulverize you into stardust. The Council's end begins with you." Ilara muted it with a flick, her eyes meeting Lyra's. "They think we're bluffing our way out like the old days? But we don't bluff." She punched the throttle, the shuttle diving into the swirling rocks. Jax hooped as he synced the core's emitters to boost the engines. A human hack, turning data storage into raw power. The pursuing ships faltered, their formation breaking against the improvised pulse. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic ping of clearing debris. But Lyra's gaze lingered on the fading blips. "We bought time, not victory. The summit's 2 jumps away, and if the Vexery alert their allies." She trailed off, the unspoken cost hanging heavy. Fractured alliances, worlds left to fend alone, just as Earth had chosen. Jax leaned back, exhaling. "One crisis at a time, Ambassador. Let's not borrow trouble from the next chapter." His words lightened the air, but Ilara knew better. The withdrawal's ripples were just beginning, and their shuttle was caught in the tide. As the field thinned, stars piercing the void ahead, she steered toward the jump point, the core's hum a steady reminder of what they carried, and what it might yet cost. Kaler stared at the flickering holoscreen in the dim chamber of the Auxiliary Council Hall, the air thick with the scent of overheating circuits and recycled oxygen. The withdrawal of Earth had been a seismic event, fracturing alliances like brittle stone under pressure. Now, 3 cycles later, the Krellian envoy's ultimatum hung in the projection: surrender the core world's trade routes or face blockade. His mandibles clicked in frustration, the sound echoing off the reinforced walls. Beside him, Mira Voss, the lone human liaison who'd refused to evacuate with her kin, leaned forward, her fingers drumming a steady rhythm on the console. She was all sharp edges, cropped hair, eyes like polished flint, and her presence was a reminder of what they'd lost: humanity's unyielding knack for turning crises into opportunities. "We can't yield," Lyra said, her voice a low hiss from the shadows. The avian diplomat from the fringe worlds perched on a high stool, feathers ruffled in agitation. She was the cautious one, always weighing risks like a merchant balancing scales, but even she saw the trap. The Krellians weren't bluffing. Their fleet had already seized 2 outposts, cutting off vital dilithium shipments. Without it, the Council's remaining ships would grind to a halt, stranding aid to the outer colonies. Kaler nodded, his elongated neck bobbing. Brave to a fault, he'd led the emergency session here to the undercity bunkers after the main hall's sabotage, likely Krellian work. "But our defenses are patchwork. Earth's tech patents are gone with them. We're flying blind on half our systems." Mira snorted, swiveling her chair to face them. "Blind? That's your problem, thinking like bureaucrats. Humans didn't build the Council on patents. We built it on hacks and grit." She pulled up a schematic, overriding the secure lock with a sequence of commands that made Lyra's beak clack in alarm. The display bloomed with improvised schematics: jury-rigged shield emitters drawing power from auxiliary life support, drone swarms reprogrammed from mining bots. "We pull this off, we don't just hold the line, we turn their blockade into a graveyard." The plan had formed in the dead of night, after their first attempt at negotiation backfired spectacularly. Kaler's diplomatic shuttle had been fired upon en route to the neutral station, forcing an emergency landing on a derelict moon. There, amid the wreckage, Mira had salvaged a Krellian probe, cracking its encryption with a handheld decoder she'd smuggled from Earth's last supply drop. It revealed their weakness: over-reliance on centralized command signals. Lyra had argued against escalation, her wings folding tight as she paced the cramped cockpit. "This invites war, not resolution. The Council's already splintering," Vortari delegates walked out yesterday. But Kaler, wiping coolant from his scales, had seen the fire in Myra's eyes. "War's here already. We adapt or we crumble." Now back in the bunker, tension coiled like a spring. Alarms blared softly as sensors picked up Krellian scouts probing the perimeter. Kaler rose, his claws scraping the metal floor. Mira synchronized the drones. "Lyra, route power from the lower grids. Careful or we'll black out the med bays." Myra's fingers flew across the interface, her breath steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. "On it. Launch in 3. Lyra hesitated, then complied, her talons tapping furiously. The room hummed with redirected energy, lights dimming as the gamble took shape. Outside, in the void beyond the bunker's viewport, the first drones streaked into the black like angry hornets. They weren't elegant warships, these repurposed hulks, but Myra's code made them dance, feinting left, then slamming into the scout ship's comm array with precision bursts. Sparks erupted in the distance, a silent fireworks of sabotage. Kaler watched, heart pounding in his chest cavity. One drone faltered, its signal jammed, tumbling into the debris field. Loss registered sharp. That unit carried irreplaceable parts from the old human yards. The Krellian response came swift, a corvette bursting from hyperspace, its cannons glowing hot. Lyra's voice cracked over the comm, "They're locking on. Evacuate the outer arrays." But Mira was already adapting, her voice calm amid the chaos. "Reroute the swarm, flank pattern Delta." The drones wheeled, a chaotic ballet, drawing fire while 2 slipped behind the corvette. Explosions bloomed, not lethal but crippling, severing its engines in a cascade of venting plasma. The ship listed, adrift, its crew's distress signal a garbled plea. Kaler exhaled, the chamber's air recyclers whirring louder to compensate. They'd bought time, but the cost lingered. Medbay power dipped, and reports trickled in of strained resources on the fringe worlds. Lyra slumped, feathers smoothing as relief warred with worry. Clever human. But the Krellians will come harder now. Mira leaned back, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit, a wry smile cracking her fatigue. Let them. We've just shown them Earth's ghost still bites. As the holoscreen updated with the Corvette's surrender beacon, Kaler felt the weight of the Council's ruin settle deeper. Humanity's exit had left voids, but in Myra's ingenuity, a spark endured, one that might yet reforge the broken alliances or burn them all. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming data streams. The Council chamber's air recyclers hummed louder than usual, a mechanical wheeze that mirrored the strain in her chest. Outside the viewport, the debris field from the sabotaged relay station spun lazily, a graveyard of twisted metal catching the distant starlight like forgotten jewels. Jax wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, his tool belt clinking against the bulkhead. That last override didn't stick. The auxiliary powers bleeding out faster than a punctured hull. His voice carried that familiar edge, half joke, half grit, but his eyes darted to the readouts, calculating angles no one else bothered with. Zorak paced the narrow aisle between stations, his iridescent scales shifting from calm blue to agitated violet. We cannot afford another delay. The rival fleet signatures are closing, 2 hours, perhaps less. If the relay fails entirely, the entire sector's comms go dark. He stopped, tentacles coiling tightly around his data pad, the cautious diplomat's poise cracking under the weight of inevitability. Lyra leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her feathered crest fluffed in defiance. Then we improvise. Earth's withdrawal gutted our alliances, but it didn't take our spines. Jax, reroute the plasma conduits, force the surge through the secondary grid. Her words snapped like a whip, ambitious fire burning through the doubt, but Elena caught the tremor in her stance, the subtle lean toward the escape pod controls. Elena straightened, forcing her mind to the puzzle. The initial plan, hacking the relay's core to broadcast a unifying signal, had backfired spectacularly when the saboteurs triggered a feedback loop, frying half their emitters. Now, with the Council's remnants fractured and the rival Zorathians poised to exploit the chaos, every second stretched like a fraying cable. She traced a finger over the schematics, spotting a faint anomaly in the auxiliary lines. Wait. The old human mining protocols, we can adapt them. Overload the debris field with a low-yield pulse, turn it into a shield. It'll buy us time to jury-rig the signal. Jax's grin flashed quick and sharp. Risky. One misfire and we're confetti. But hell, it's better than sitting here like bait. He dove back into the panels, fingers flying over the interfaces, sparks dancing at his touch. Zorak hesitated, his gaze flicking to Lyra, who nodded once, resolute. Do it, he said finally, the violet fading to a reluctant green. As the pulse generators whined to life, the chamber vibrated, the viewport filling with the eerie glow of ionized particles. Elena held her breath, watching the debris coalesce into a shimmering barrier, just as the first enemy probes breached the outer markers. But the shield held, for now. Alarms blared softly in the background, a reminder that the surge had weakened their own drives. Lyra's feathers bristled. That bought minutes, not hours. What's next, Captain? Elena met her eyes, the weight of Earth's shadow lingering in the air, a political ruin they alone might mend, or die trying to. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones like a persistent headache. The viewport ahead showed the swirling blues and greens of Lyrian Prime's atmosphere, a world that had once been a neutral hub for the Galactic Council but now felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Her team, Jax, the wiry engineer with a knack for turning scrap into salvation, Mira, the sharp-tongued diplomat whose wit could disarm a room or ignite a riot, and Thorn, the stoic security chief whose silence spoke volumes, sat strapped in around her. They were the last human delegation, Earth's abrupt withdrawal from the Council 6 months ago, leaving a vacuum that rival species were scrambling to fill. Scans show increased patrols around the central spire, Jax muttered, his fingers dancing over a portable console. Krell forces have doubled since our last intel. If we're sneaking in for that data core, we're walking into a hornet's nest. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. The challenge wasn't just the rival Krell expansionists eyeing the Council's crumbling archives. It was the resource shortage crippling their shuttle's life support after a skirmish en route. One wrong move, and they'd be breathing recycled air laced with failure. We adapt. Mira, your contact's inside. Can they get us past the outer grid without raising alarms? Mira leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she reviewed the holographic map. Old ally, Council Archivist named Soren. He's cautious but loyal to the old ways. Problem is, the Krell have him under watch. If we signal him too early it backfires, we tip them off. Thorn grunted, checking his sidearm for the third time. Then we go in quiet. No signals. Infiltrate the maintenance tunnels. The plan had seemed solid back on the outpost, but as the shuttle dipped lower, turbulence rattled the hull, and Ilara felt the first twinge of doubt. Earth's exit had shattered alliances. Humans were now pariahs, accused of abandoning the fragile peace. This mission, to extract evidence of Krell's sabotage that could rally the fractured council back to neutrality, was their shot at redemption. But the stakes pressed in. Fail and Lyrian Prime might tip into full war with human worlds caught in the crossfire. They touched down in a shadowed ravine outside the city, the shuttle's cloaking field flickering under strain from the dwindling power cells. Ilara led the way through the underbrush, the air thick with the scent of alien flora, sweet and cloying like overripe fruit masking decay. Jax rigged a bypass on the perimeter fence, sparks flying in brief bursts that lit his determined face. Got it? 30 minutes before it resets. Inside the tunnels, the atmosphere shifted to damp confinement, bioluminescent fungi casting eerie glows on rusted conduits. Mira whispered coordinates, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her shoulders. Soren's office is 2 levels up. But if the Krell have wired the vents. A distant clang echoed, patrol boots on metal grates. Thorn signaled halt, his hand hovering near his weapon. Ilara's heart pounded, the air growing thinner as their suits rationed oxygen. The early plan to link with Soren directly was unraveling. Scouts had already sealed the upper access. They needed a pivot. Jax, can we reroute through the waste recyclers? Ilara asked, keeping her voice low. He crouched, scanning a junction box. Risky. Corrosives could eat through our suits in minutes. But yeah, clever adaptation. I'll jury-rig a shield from the shuttle's spare plating. As Jax worked, Mira pulled Ilara aside. This isn't just about the data. The Council's in ruin because Earth pulled out without warning. Soren might not trust us. Then we earn it, Ilara replied, her resolve hardening. Thorn covered their flank, his eyes scanning the shadows. The reroute succeeded, but not without cost. A hiss of acid grazed Thorn's arm, searing through his sleeve and drawing a sharp hiss from the big man. He bounded quickly, but his movements slowed, the injury a tangible reminder of the peril. They emerged into the archive sublevel, the air humming with dormant servers. Soren waited in the dim light, his elongated features pinched with worry. Humans? Bold to come here. No warmth, just wary assessment. Mira stepped forward. We need the sabotage logs. Proof the Krell engineered the supply chain collapse that forced Earth's hand. He hesitated, glancing at the monitors flickering with incoming alerts. Krell forces were closing in. Someone had tripped a silent alarm during their tunnel breach. It'll cost me everything. But the Council crumbles without truth. As they downloaded the core, alarms blared. Thorn barricaded the door, his injured arm trembling but unyielding. Jax uploaded the data to their secure relay, fingers blurring. Ilara covered Mira as Soren handed over a physical key chip. Backup proof, etched with irrefutable timestamps. The escape was chaos. Blaster fire scorched the walls as they dashed through corridors, the city's spires looming like jagged teeth against the stormy sky. Thorn took a hit shielding Jax, crumpling but firing back with grim precision. Go. I've got the rear. Ilara hauled him up, the team's camaraderie forged in the fire of necessity. They burst into the ravine, shuttle engines whining to life on fumes. As they lifted off, Lyrian Prime receding below, Ilara knew the victory was bittersweet. Thorn would need Regan treatments they couldn't afford, and Soren's fate hung in the balance, likely arrested by now. But the data beamed to neutral outposts carried weight, evidence that could rebuild bridges, or Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The viewport ahead framed the swirling chaos of the Nebula Veil, a remnant of the old Council's failed terraforming experiment, gases twisting in lethal eddies, hiding the Council's hidden outpost where the real negotiations would happen. Beside her, Jax Harlan, her chief engineer, hunched over a flickering console, his fingers dancing across the controls with the precision of someone who jury-rigged half the human fleet back to life during the withdrawal. "Shields holding at 60%, Jax muttered, his voice gravelly from too many hours without sleep. "But if we hit another plasma surge like the last one, we're venting atmosphere. You sure about cutting through here instead of the long route?" Ilara shot him a glance, her jaw set in that stubborn line that had earned her the nickname Iron Voss, among the remnants of Earth's diplomatic corps. "The long route gives the council delegates time to consolidate. They're already splintering. Zoratha's faction is pushing for sanctions on us, but the Vexari are wavering. We punch through now, show them we're not running scared, and we force their hand." In the co-pilot's seat, Lena Torres, the young xenolinguist who'd been thrust into this mess after the embassy evacuation, adjusted her headset. Her dark eyes flicked between the sensor readouts and the encrypted comms feed. Lena's gift wasn't for ships or strategy, it was for words, for unraveling the subtle dances of alien politics. But out here, words felt as fragile as the shuttle's hull. "I've got chatter from the outpost," she said, her tone steady despite the tension coiling in her shoulders. "They're panicking. Earth's pullout has the Council's trade alliances fracturing. Without our tech exports, half their economies are grinding to a halt. But if we don't deliver the proposal packet intact, they'll paint us as the villains who abandoned them to starve." The shuttle bucked as a tendril of ionized gas lashed against the hull, sparks erupting from a panel near Jax's feet. He cursed under his breath, slamming a fist on the override switch. Alarms blared, red lights painting the cabin in bloody hues. Direct hit on the port nacelle. "We're losing thrust, maneuverability's down to 20%. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of human grit she'd seen in Sims and salvage ops back on the colonies. No time for the Council's fancy inertial dampeners. They were flying a stripped-down bird, human-made and human tough. "Jax, reroute auxiliary power to the graph coils. Use the nebula's magnetic field to slingshot us. Calculate the vector." He paused, brow furrowing, then nodded, his cautious nature yielding to the fire in her eyes. "Risky. One miscalculation and we spin out into the core. But yeah, it could work." His hands blurred over the keys, pulling up the nebulous flux patterns on a holographic overlay. The image bloomed like a storm cloud, currents of energy weaving unpredictable paths. Lena leaned forward, her voice cutting through the din. "Wait, I'm picking up a distress beacon. It's one of the Council's scout drones caught in the eddies. If we ignore it, they'll say we're heartless. But rescuing it means deviating course, burning what little power we've got left." Ilara waited, the weight of Earth's isolation pressing down. The withdrawal hadn't been cowardice. It was survival, pulling resources home after decades of one-sided deals. But proving humanity's worth now in this moment could tip the scales. "We grab it?" "Jax, adjust the slingshot to intersect. Lena, prep the docking clamps and hail them. Tell the Council we're not leaving anyone behind, drone or not." The engineer grumbled but complied, his wits surfacing in a dry quip. "Great, now we're playing space janitors. Just don't expect me to polish it afterward." As the shuttle dove into the nebula's heart, the gases parted like a curtain, revealing the glint of the drone amid the turmoil. Ilara's hands steadied on the controls, guiding them through the improvised arc. The ship groaned, metal protesting, but held. They snagged the drone with a magnetic tug, its frame scraping against the airlock. Pulling clear, Jax wiped sweat from his forehead. "We're through. Outpost in visual range. But that stunt fried the secondary systems. We'll need dockside repairs to fly out." Lena smiled faintly, decoding the drone's data burst. "It's got Council secrets, leverage on Zoratha's bribes. This changes everything." Ilara allowed herself a breath, the stars steadying ahead. The cost was real. A crippled ship, exhausted crew, and the ever-present risk of betrayal. But in that grit, humanity's edge shone, not in overwhelming force but in the choice to adapt, to reach out even when the galaxy turned its back. The outpost loomed, a fragile beacon in the void, and with it the final push for redemption. The chamber's vast dome hummed with the low thrum of failing shields, the air thick with the scent of scorched circuits and alien incense. Ambassador Lyra of the Vexari Alliance paced the central dais, her iridescent scales flickering under the emergency lights, each step a sharp click against the polished obsidian floor. "This is madness," she hissed, tentacles coiling in agitation. "Earth's envoys abandoned the vote, and now the core worlds fracture? We've lost the quorum." Captain Elias Thorne leaned against the console, his human frame unyielding amid the chaos, wiping sweat from his brow with a calloused hand. He'd seen worse, hull breaches on derelict freighters, pirate ambushes in the void, but this political implosion felt like a slow bleed. Beside him, Dr. Mira Voss adjusted her neural interface, fingers flying over holographic readouts, her cautious eyes narrowing as data streams flickered. "Not abandoned," she murmured, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Withdrawn strategically. The Council's been bleeding us dry for decades, resource tithes, veto overrides. We're done playing nice." From the shadowed alcove, Kale, the wiry Trellian scout, chuckled dryly, his multifaceted eyes glinting. "Strategically? That's one word for it." The brass back home finally grew a spine. "But look at this mess." He gestured to the fractured holomap, where faction lines splintered like cracked ice. The Vexery pulling toward isolation, the Quran Empire eyeing expansion, and the neutral clusters dissolving into petty alliances. Earth's exit had toppled the first domino, exposing the rot beneath the unity. Lyra whirled on them, her voice rising. "Your spine dooms us all. Without humanity's block, the Empire will seize the relay networks. Billions in the outer rims, starved, cut off." Tension coiled in the room like a spring, the external challenge manifesting in the blaring alarms. A rival Quran fleet inbound, exploiting the Council's paralysis to claim the neutral stations. The stakes weren't abstract. Elias could almost hear the distant screams from simulated evacuations, the real cost of inaction. Elias straightened, his brave resolve cutting through the doubt. "We're not doomed yet. Mira, the backdoor protocol, can we jury-rig the old Earth relays?" It was a gamble born of late-night strategy sessions in the Envoy ship, where human grit had mapped forgotten code paths from the early Federation days. No grand speeches, just the raw edge of necessity. Mira nodded, her wit flashing in a quick grin. "Already on it. But it'll fry the auxiliary grid, permanent blackout on non-essentials." She patched in lines of code weaving like threads, pulling from human ingenuity, adaptive algorithms that mimic neural nets, outpacing the Council's rigid AI. Kale flanked her, his cautious hands steadying the interface as sparks flew. "Empire's jammers are closing. 10 minutes. The plan they'd hatched hours ago, rerouting power through abandoned human outposts, backfired initially, a surge that nearly overloaded the chamber's defenses. Lyra had argued against it, calling it reckless, but now she joined the fray, her tentacles interfacing with the alien ports, bridging the gap where human tech clashed with Vexery harmonics. "Fools," she muttered, but her actions spoke alliance, a tentative camaraderie forged in the fire. Alarms peaked as the Quran vanguard breached the outer perimeter, dreadnought shadows looming on the viewscreen. Elias gripped the manual override, muscles straining against the feedback. "Now." Myra's code bloomed, a digital cascade that hijacked the Empire's own relays, turning their weapons arrays against phantom targets. Illusions of a human counterfleet, drawn from archived battle sims. The invaders faltered, confusion rippling through their comms. Kale hooped as the shield stabilized, the holomap shifting. Neutral clusters realigning, whispers of reform echoing from the core worlds. Lyra exhaled, scales dulling to a calm blue. "You've bought time. But Earth's withdrawal scars run deep. Trust fractures won't mend overnight." Elias watched the fleet retreat into the stars, the chamber falling quiet save for the hum of repairs. Victory tasted bittersweet, a lingering consequence in the dimmed lights and wary glances. Humanity's gambit had saved the day, but the Council would never be the same, remade perhaps in the image of earned resilience.